Hey everybody, and welcome to another lecture with Coding with Roby. And in this lecture, we are going to go over deployment with render. Many of you may be asking yourself, what is render? Well, render is a platform as a service. A platform as a service is one of the main categories of cloud computing. This usually means someone will have to pay on a per-use basis. However, some providers charge a flat monthly fee. Render helps developers build, run, and operate applications entirely on the cloud. This means instead of an application being hosted on your personal PC through your local host, we are allowing a cloud computing company to handle the deployment of our application. This allows developers to focus on coding and not have to worry about the infrastructure of their applications. Keeping developers focused on development instead of infrastructure helps a ton when trying to rapidly produce new features. Many companies rely on cloud computing companies like Render to handle the entire infrastructure of their application. So what is Render's pricing and how does it change? Well, the pricing depends on many factors of how you want your application to perform online. For majority of this course, we'll be focusing on the free trial, which ultimately comes with the free plan. However, feel free to use whichever plan you're most comfortable with for your application. And remember, businesses of all sizes use Render as their cloud platform as a service provider. When deploying an application manually and having it access to so many people in the world, a lot of infrastructure is involved. You have to plan out the code deployment system and how they'll be involved with your deployment and access to users. You have to think about the DevOps of the application and how it relates to the continuous integration and continuous deployment, which is also known as CI/CD. How do we deal with the scalability and load balancing of the application? And more, so we can see many different elements needing to be aligned consistently to have a successful deployment of an application. Again, this is why we are using Render, so we can focus on the code while Render focuses on the infrastructure for us. Now this brings us back to how does Render work within our current deployment cycle? We have our application using Git as our version control. We have our application backed up on GitHub as our online hosting service. Once we create an account on Render, we will set it up through our GitHub to deploy changes that happen to our master branch. And then finally, once Render deploys the changes from our master branch, the application will be live and available to all individuals that call the service and application. There are different platforms than Render if you're interested in learning different cloud providers. Some of the most popular include AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud. However, for this course, we'll be focused on Render. Alright, well this wraps up this lecture on what Render is and how we'll be using it within our application, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey everybody, and welcome back to another video with Coding with Roby. Now in this lecture, we are going to implement our requirements.txt file. Now our requirements.txt file is a file that is going to tell our environments all the dependencies that we need for our application to work. So let's go ahead and type in pip3, or just pip if you're on Windows, freeze greater than requirements.txt. And then press enter. When you do that, we can see that requirements.txt file was generated. If we open this up, we can see that it has all the dependencies we need to make this application run. We have Unicorn, we have our Starlight, We have our SQL parse or SQLAlchemy, and I'm sure at the top we even have FastAPI. So it's going to have all of the dependencies that we needed for our application that's currently installed on our environment and put it in this requirements.txt file that is going to install all of these dependencies on any environment this goes to. Well, let's go ahead and add this. So git add-all. I'm going to git commit-m add requirements file. And now I'm going to push these changes. So our requirements file is now going to be on Git. And the reason it needs to be on Git is because we are going to connect GitHub to our render environment in the future videos, so we can just pull from GitHub to deploy. All right, well, this wraps up everything we need to do for this video, which is to add this requirements.txt file, and I'll see you in the next lecture. All right, so now let's go ahead and create our render environment. So make sure you go to render.com. And once you're on render.com, we need to create an account. So let's go to get started. And right here, you can sign in with an email or password or use GitLab or Google. I highly recommend using our GitHub as our sign-in reference. The reason being, if you sign in with our GitHub account, it automatically connects to GitHub. So we don't have to do any kind of third-party acceptance afterwards. It just does it automatically with GitHub. So I'm going to click GitHub. And I've already signed in before. So right here, you're going to have to type in your GitHub information and then allow Render to be able to access your GitHub. But after that, you will be signed in. Here we can see that Render offers a few different things. We have static sites, web services, private services, background workers, and some other things. Well, we're going to be creating a web service. Even though we're going to be building a full stack web application, that is still a web service when it comes to Render. So let's click New Web Service. Here, I'm going to say Coding with Roby Deployments, Connect. So that's the Git repository that I'm connecting to our Render account. Here we need to create a name. I'm going to call it Coding with Roby Deployment. We can skip over root directory. Here inside the environment, we can say Docker or what kind of programming language it's going to be. We're not going to be using Docker. We're just going to be using Python 3. Now for the region, make sure you select a region that's close to you. Ohio US East is closest to me, but make sure you're selecting a region that's closest to you because it's going to have to travel that far. So if you're selecting Singapore, but you're in the United States or Canada, it has to travel all the way to Singapore just to make that latency connection. So just click the region that's closest to you. Branch, now the branch inside deployment is going to be my main. Here we go, we want to use this build command of pip install -r requirements.txt. This is our requirements.txt file, so it's saying install everything that's going to be within our requirements.txt file. And then we need to implement our start command. And our start command is going to be unicorn main app -- host space 0.0.0.0 space -- port 10,000. And we want to make sure we're selected on the free plan. And now let's say create web service. All right, and when you click create web service, it's going to bring you up with this console and it's going to start the build and the deployment. So it's going to clone from our Git. It's going to check out the commit. It's going to download all the cache and all the dependencies that we put in a requirements.txt file. And then it's going to finally upload with our command of unicorn main app host 0000 and port 10,000. Now, this can take a few minutes, so I'm going to come back to the video once it's complete. All right, and now our deployment was a success. We can see that our build was successful and then we deployed successfully. Now, if for some reason your build failed, now just make sure you review my notes about how we add the deployment scripts. But sometimes because this is a free version of Render, the deployment will just fail because of performance and resources. So if that happens, come over here to this manual deploy button, click it, and say clear build cache and deploy. If this does not work again, then review our video. But it should work fine. After this, you get our URL. I'm going to say open in a new tab. And there we have it. We have our application where we can sign in as Coding with Roby. And boom, we are signed in. Now you might be wondering, why are there already users and why is there already to-dos? Well, if we open up our PyCharm, we just deployed our todos.db file. So in my database.py file, I'm using my SQLite. Well, in the next video, let's go ahead and set up our Postgres production database to work with our production deployment. All right, well, now that our Coding with Roby deployment is deployed successfully, we now need to add a Postgres production database. If we go over to New, we can see that Render has a PostgreSQL. If you click it, we can create a Postgres database. Now, the only issue that Render has with Postgres database is if you scroll down, we can see free plan databases will expire in 90 days and will be deleted if not upgraded. And upgraded means pay money. Well, if you're cool with paying money or your database getting deleted in 90 days, go ahead and feel free to use Render. But I am not cool with that, so I'm going to use Elephant SQL. So Elephant SQL is a way for us to be able to create a production database, and then we'll connect our Render deployed application to Elephant SQL. So go ahead and say login. For this, you can sign in any way you want. I signed in with Google. All right, so I have my Coding with Roby account. We're going to want to create a new instance. And here we can name our instance. So I'm going to name this Deploy Database. Now they have different plans. So here's Tiny Turtle, which is free. This is what I'm going to be using. But if you add a credit card, you can add all these different like Simple Spider, Crazy Cat, Pretty Panda, all these hilarious names that are increasing the performance of your database. And here we can add a tag, and I'm just going to say demo tag. Now we need to select our region. So our region, you're going to want to make sure that your database region is close to your Render application region. So remember, I did Ohio for our Render. Well, it looks like you need to pay to use Ohio for SQL Elephant. So I'm going to use Northern Virginia, which is also US East. So it's only a couple states away from Ohio. And I'm going to say review. And then down here, it's going to give you an overview of everything you're setting up. And I'm going to say create instance. Boom. Well, our database is now created. So let's go into our database. And here we can see our URL and our password. So let's go ahead and say copy. Perfect. Now let's go into our application. So now that we're in our database, here's our SQLite information. I'm just going to comment out this. So our engine and our SQLAlchemy database URL is going to be commented out. And I'm going to uncomment out this SQLAlchemy database URL and engine. This is for Postgres. Let's go ahead and paste in our URL. All right, so we pasted in this URL. And now the only thing is SQLAlchemy wants to look for PostgreSQL. So make sure you add QL at the end of this URL. All right, if we go ahead and do a get status, we can see there's been one change to our database.py. We can say get add, get commit, and I'm going to just say production database change. And let's go ahead and do a git push. If we go back to our application, we can see that deployment has started. Now our Elephant SQL, if we go over to browser, we can say, hey, we want to query our database here, but we can see that Elephant SQL has no tables. And it shouldn't have any tables if you just created this instance. Well, we know that in our application, when a deploy is successful and we open up our application, SQLAlchemy within our application will create all of the tables. So after this deployment is done, we'll come right back to this video. All right, and now coding with Roby is deployed. So now let's go ahead and go to this application. So open link and tab. Once we open it, let's go back to our Elephant SQL, go to browser. And now let's go look at our queries. Now we can see that there's two tables available, to-dos and users. Well, now that it's all uploaded, we can use our application as a production-ready application that's now available to everyone. All right, well, that's how we deploy our application. So we have our application deployed on render, and we have Elephant SQL as our production database. Congratulations, our application is now ready for the world to use it. And I'll see you in the next video.